All right, so I'm here with Dan Lieberman from Caltrain. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
How you doing, rail fans? Good to see you.
You may have seen Dan. He posts videos to Facebook, right, as part of your job with Caltrain, huh?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on everywhere people are watching us. We try to get the word about what's going on the rails and what there is to see.
That's what you're talking about when I see it. Imagine that, right? So, Dan, just for our viewers here, why don't you talk a little bit about who you are? Like, how did you get involved with Caltrain? Do you like trains? That kind of thing. How long have you been involved with Caltrain? That kind of thing.
I started with Caltrain in January of 2017. So at a fun time for the agency, just as electrification was first getting off the ground. It's I've been a San Mateo County resident since I was about 3 years old. I'm still living in San Mateo, which is still a lovely place to be. And Caltrain is part of my daily commute. It's I hop on a Samtrans bus and get the 250, take it over to San Mateo Station, hop on down to San Carlos, and get to work.
Right. So now as part of your job, you probably get that as a perk, don't you?
Oh, it's a pretty nice perk.
Yeah, that's good.
if they can't hook us up with the Go Pass when we're working there, I'm going to have some problems with management. So I'm glad they can take care of it.
That's just something you need to take care of if you're operating a transportation system, right? Taking care of the employees. Oh boy! So, what exactly do you do for Caltrain?
All right, well, I'm a public affairs specialist,
okay.
Which basically I talk for a living, which is a pretty sweet deal. It's and I do this for the San Mateo County Transit District, which covers Caltrain, Samtrans, and the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. So it's really just it's a lot of stuff. It's talking to the media. I write a lot of press releases a week. It's in fact I got to get back to the office after this and put one together about our express bus study. I do some blog work. I've got a few columns. I do On the Move, which highlights various bus routes throughout the system. I do the Choo Choo Train, which highlights good restaurants along the Caltrain line. So it's always looking for recommendations. You can find me at Lieberman Tweets on Twitter if you have something to recommend. But yeah, just anything relating to public transportation in San Mateo County ends up being something I talk about.
So Dan, Caltrain's in the process of being electrified. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that means and how it works?
All right, it's long story short, it's a really big deal. We've known that electrification of Caltrain is necessary for quite some time, even shortly after the Joint Powers Board came about and acquired Caltrain back in '92. The rubber really hit the road around 2012 when an agreement was struck between Caltrain and the High Speed Rail Authority where High Speed Rail would provide some funding to develop electrification. That, along with coupled with local, state, and federal funds, really brought the $2 billion together to help put this together. Yeah, it's a big deal because electric trains are they're cleaner, they're quieter, they're more efficient, and they can haul more people. It's the EMUs or electric multiple units, which I'm sure your viewers know about.
Many do. Yes, I'm sure they do.
They have their own individual power source. So rather than being essentially dragged by a locomotive, they have their own power. So it's easier to do larger train sets. We're going to launch in 2022. With at least a minimum of a 6-car train set. If some things go well for us and we can get the cars necessary, we can possibly launch with 7. It's and certainly the intention is to move to 7 and possibly beyond that, just so we can keep increasing our capacity. It's which is really necessary. Since EMUs can accelerate and decelerate faster, we can actually fit in more train sets per hour.
Mm-hmm.
So we can increase capacity both on individual train sets and overall throughout the system, which is just desperately needed. I mean, if you're riding Caltrain at peak hours at this point, it's crowded. And it's very clear why it's crowded if you get on 101, which is even more crowded. I was at the groundbreaking of the Burlingame interchange a little while back, where they told me about 250,000 cars go through there every day. So that's the norm for 101 in San Mateo County, a quarter million cars. And that's and Caltrain's carrying 65,000 people, and that so which is a very necessary relief valve. It's just so crowded out there, and it's and Caltrain so Caltrain just needs to be able to keep up, needs to be able to take more people on. And because we're seeing growth, we've been growing by about 6% ridership a year for the last decade. It's tripled since 2004, and the demand is not going away. We're also seeing growth south of San Jose, going out to Gilroy with more people riding that, and it's but like long story short, we've got a lot of people. Caltrain is at its capacity and needs to find a way to grow in order to meet that growing demand.
Right. Something you mentioned a second ago, and it wasn't on my original notes, but something you said made me think of an issue I keep seeing in media from South County, Monterey area. Something about how someone somewhere is going to extend to Salinas and down in that area, but I don't think the author knows the difference between Caltrain and Caltrans because it's always very nebulous about who exactly is going to serve that. Do you know the answer to that?
It's I know that it's too early to say who that is. We have heard of those ideas. I don't think we have any formal opinion on them. But I mean, but generally we're supportive of extending transit anywhere where the demand exists. So if we can find that demand and find a way of meeting that demand, then that's certainly something we can look into, and and hopefully we can find a way to make it work for everybody.
Okay.
I mean, really, what we're seeing, with the high price of housing in the Bay Area, coupled with the constantly growing economy, is people are very willing to live an hour or 2 hours away from work, just to make it work, to be able to own a home and still make a good Bay Area wage. And the crazy thing is when you have, I've talked to people who are driving in from Vacaville or Vallejo or Stockton, which is a commute that would drive me absolutely crazy.
I think that might be a little loud.
I think probably. we can start going over.
Sure, no, that's fine. Or just we'll wait for the train to go by, and you can continue with your Vacaville and so forth.
There you go.
Okay. Had to stop for a passing train.
Yeah,
it happens.
The trains take priority. You can't tell them to wait for things like this. They get really picky about it.
This is like the old days, and we're a freight train. So the passenger trains take priority over our interview.
There you go. But it's like I said, we see people living very far afield from the Bay Area and making that commute in, willing to spend 3-4 hours a day in a car. I mean, and which is crazy to me, but it's clearly something that people are willing to do. So, providing a transit option, is that can get people off the road and find find something that's better, is better for them, for their mental health, for time with their family. It's better for our environment. It's better for our roads. I mean, because it's a tremendous amount of particulate matter that we're putting out, that we're breathing in. It's a disaster for our carbon footprint as well, and it's something that that needs proactive work in order to prevent. Yeah. It's some of our estimates on Caltrain electrification by 2040, the electrified system should be able to remove 619,000 vehicle miles driven per day. Which is just an absurd number, but that's where we are with this funny point in Bay Area history, where people are willing to make these crazy super commutes in order to get by.
Right, and as someone who really loves traffic, that would be me. And all the viewers know this.
Everybody loves traffic.
Oh yeah,
it's just one of the best.
Highlights. It's one of the highlights of any trip for me.
You get to sit in your car and wonder where you went wrong in your life, and curse at other people who drive like idiots. Like who doesn't want more of that?
There's lots of time for introspection when you're sitting behind someone doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
But you said something.
I mean, at least they get to listen to your podcast while they're driving. So that's
true. Oh, actually, that's true. You should definitely listen to the podcast while you're driving.
But you can also do that on the train and not hate yourself as much.
That's true. Plus, if there's Wi-Fi enabled on trains, some trains have Wi-Fi enabled too, and buses do too. You could listen to it without even going through your data on your phone.
Which is a lovely segue to the idea that the electrified system is actually going to have Wi-Fi on board. That is something we've heard loud and clear from a lot of people. It's that's making sure that it's a strong enough system that can support, because we're again, we have a Silicon Valley audience, so there's going to be people who are doing some heavy duty stuff on the train every day, and everyone's going to be doing it. So it's going to be a challenge making sure we have a provider that can shoulder that burden. But we want to make sure that that's something that is going to be happening.
Yeah, well, one would hope in this area that there's a company that can provide that.
If we can't find it here, something has gone wrong.
Well, we'll see though. I mean, because I've been places where you wouldn't expect good internet, and it's better than what I get at my house. So,
you can be surprised,
right? So you never know. So I'm curious about something, and you were talking about the EMUs, and this is something that, as you were talking about it, I know a little bit about trains. Okay, that's kind of what the show's about.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did I hear you right, that the all the EMUs actually powered? They all have powered axles?
Yes.
Is that how the acceleration works so well?
That is my understanding.
That.
Yes, and it's essentially, rather than having a full locomotive, there's just going to be a cab for the engineer.
Right.
Somewhat similar to a BART train. It's that's the beautiful thing about it. It's whereas a diesel train, if you start tacking on extra cars, it's going to create a lot more drag, and it's going to it's just going to slow down the whole thing. It's here that's not the case. You can just keep swapping more in, and there may not. I mean, like really, the upward limit on cars is probably going to be determined more by platform length than it will by the ability to move the vehicle, and that gives us some more flexibility, and but also just is really going to increase our capacity at all hours of the day.
I think having a problem with platform length is a nice problem to have to solve, right? That means you have all those people off the road. Right.
Exactly, and certainly it's a problem that's much easier to deal with than the ability to fit that many train sets into an hour.
Sure, yeah, sure. Because if you can have the difference between having 8 or 10 cars in one train, but instead of having 2 trains with 5 cars,
mm-hmm.
Or 6, whatever. I mean, because I've noticed that the trains do run with more cars these days, as opposed to what I was used to when we did the Caltrain 2005 video 10, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
They had 5-car trains. That was it. Now I've seen 6-car trains here and there.
Yeah, but ultimately that's, for what I understand, that's for the most part our ceiling. We start getting diminishing returns if we tack onto that. With the electric trains, that's not going to be the case. It's to some degree the sky's the limit. But provided we have enough vehicles to meet that demand, which is the goal for the launch was to get 75% of the fleet electrified. Now some funding has become available that might make it possible to be fully electrified at launch, at least from Tamiami to San Francisco. The down south to Gilroy, that's not currently electrified, and that is. Well, that's a longer story.
Yeah, that's all UP track too, though.
Exactly. So that is a much larger issue that may not have an answer coming soon.
That's something to tie in with the high-speed rail later, probably.
Yeah,
would be my guess.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah. So, what else is going on with Caltrain and transportation around the Bay Area that you're aware of?
A lot. I think one of the big pieces of it, Caltrain's been working on the Caltrain business plan for a while now. The central push of it being looking out to 2040 and trying to predict how our system is going to change, how demand on our system is going to change. Ultimately, a big piece of responsible transportation policy is looking at the crystal ball and seeing what's coming, what's on the horizon, so you can get ahead of those curves instead of being constantly behind it. What it's looking like, we could potentially have a 300% increase in demand on the system.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a big number, and it sounds crazy until you start thinking about everything that's happening. The city of San Francisco recently signed off on the Peninsula Avenue alignment, which is the downtown extension, which is the plan to extend Caltrain to the Transbay Terminal. Very rough timelines. Talk about 2029 being a goal for that. Ultimately, there's a lot of funding issues that need to be answered first. But yeah, the goal is to get that further in the city, which could really pick up, just increase. We're going to see. We can see a lot more demand out of that. You see a lot more people, seeing the option to take advantage of Caltrain, and because of an electrified system with an expanded capacity, it's whereas now that demand would be very difficult to meet, we would actually have room on board to accommodate it. But that and that'd be a big deal in and of itself. But at the same time, we also have the discussions between Samtrans and Facebook regarding the rebuilding of the Dumbarton Rail Bridge,
Right.
which also brings into which would connect us with ACE and Capital Corridor. So people coming in from the East Bay and beyond could have access to Caltrain tracks, which is another source of demand. We're also seeing, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a lot of growth down by Gilroy, where more people again, living farther out, where they can buy a house and making the commute up. So being able, finding a way to meet that demand. And the peninsula is growing by leaps and bounds as well. If you go up our line, it's you can see a lot of development projects, transit-oriented development in particular. It's right by my office in San Carlos, where it's where land that used to just be scrub brush and parking lots is now apartment complexes. Hayward Park has gone through huge developments in recent years, and there are more on the way. South San Francisco, where I was at just yesterday, it's we've got big apartments coming up near where the new South City Station is going to be. So as these transit-oriented developments start coming to fruition, people start moving in. That's a population of people who are who we expect to be moving there specifically to take advantage of Caltrain. So there's a lot. And the Warriors.
Oh, right.
The
Going to San
Warriors are moving into San
Francisco,
Francisco. Not very far from our line. So that which is obviously Giants service has been a huge deal for us.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of Giants fans who want to take advantage of Caltrain. We're going to see Warriors fans doing the same thing. There's going to be a lot more reasons to be on Caltrain, and thankfully, because of electrification, we're going to be able to have a shot at keeping up with that demand.
Sure.
But there's a lot going on, and and electrification is just a very necessary piece of trying to stay ahead of that.
So I keep hearing about this closure in San Francisco, but I'm unclear. What exactly is that all about?
Well, it's that's directly related to electrification. North of the Bayshore Station on weekends, we've been suspending service. Samtrans is providing a bus bridge so we can still get people up to the 22nd Street and and San Francisco stations at 4th and King. So it's so if you're still heading north, we've still got you covered. That's free of charge. But we've had to suspend service on weekends because work for electrification has to happen in the 4 tunnels. Particularly, we need to. There's notching going on, which is just extending the tunnel a little bit in order to accommodate the new trains.
Are they a little bit wider?
A little bit wider.
Oh, okay.
It's
Didn't know that.
in addition, we're installing anchor bolts in the ceiling, which is going to support the system that provides electricity to the trains. It's because they have the train will have a pantograph connected to the third rail. Essentially, the idea is rather than having the third rail on the ground where it's a potential safety concern, we keep it up high where unless you're particularly tall, you're not going to be able to run into. In addition, there's also some drainage work that's necessary, so we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone and taking care of that. That's going to go on for until late spring. The goal is to have that done by the time Giant season starts up again. And this is going to be the biggest disruption throughout the entire electrification process.
Just this point where they're retrofitting the tunnels basically for electricity.
And these tunnels were built in 1905. These are so there's we need to get in there. You need to take your time. You need to make sure everything is done appropriately considering. But it's that's it's a big part of the project, and it's just necessary to get the whole thing working.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention about the tunnels being that old. A lot of people don't realize, a lot of people who live in the area don't realize that this rail line has been there since the 1860s.
Oh, yeah.
So this is infrastructure that's been around. Right?
I don't know if Abe Lincoln came out and autographed one of the rails, but he practically could have. It's funny to think. Particularly in these discussions about electrification, it's really funny to think that these tracks were laid when this was just, farmland
Sure.
and dusty fields, and it was there when it was, when it was orange groves, and to think, and going back then, I don't think anyone predicted one day this is going to be one of the hottest economies on earth, one of the biggest job markets. There's going to be the biggest steel companies around here, and it's so and ultimately the real challenge is making sure that infrastructure that was built for a much quieter, sleepier place
Mm-hmm.
is brought up to speed and can meet the needs of a very different place.
Excellent. Well, hey, thanks for stopping down here to talk
Absolutely.
to us. Maybe someday we'll have you back on again. I mean, as this stuff develops, because it's hard to keep. There's so many places to get information. It's hard to keep track. And I don't know that people come to the podcast necessarily to get important information like this, but it's cool to have you on.
Well, it's
Well, thank
this is what they pay me the big bucks for. I'm happy to get out there and talk about what Caltrain's up to. We've got
Right.
some exciting stuff going on. Everyone should get a chance to hear about it.
And they're paying him big bucks because he's been smiling the whole time.
Well, I'm just glad I get to be up in the tower for once. This is really
Right.
cool. They don't trust me in here without an escort.
Well, it took some finagling for me to get a key too. So
There we go.
all right, we'll catch everybody back in the studio.